It's time to sit back, relax, and listen to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life will inspire, motivate, and empower you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. Change your attitude, change your life. And now, here's your host, Joan Herman.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life brings you interviews with some of the most inspirational and influential people in the world. It's our goal to educate and empower you so you can live your best life now. Thank you for taking time for yourself, and thank you for letting us be a part of your life. We have another great show for you today. Today's guest, Mark Wolynn, believes that the traumas of our parents, grandparents, and even great-grandparents can live in our words, fears, behaviors, and unexplained physical symptoms. According to Mark, this is what scientists are now calling inherited family trauma or secondary PTSD. Mark is the director of the Family Constellation Institute and creator of the Core Language Approach. He is the author of the book, It Didn't Start With You, How Inherited Family Trauma Shapes Who We Are and How to End the Cycle. Welcome, Mark. Thanks for joining us.
Well, hi, Joan. Thank you for having me.
So, Mark, this is a fascinating topic. Let's begin with an explanation of how inherited family trauma or secondary PTSD can be passed on genetically from a parent to a child.
So when we have a trauma, when we experience trauma, it changes us. Literally, it causes a chemical change in our DNA. And this can affect the way our genes function, sometimes for generations. So when we go to have kids, to use a computer analogy, they don't always come equipped with a clean hard drive. There's an operating system already in place, one that contains the fallout from our traumas, our parents' traumas, even our grandparents' traumas. And our kids can be born with fears, feelings, sometimes even symptoms that don't belong to them.
So, Mark, is this tied to epigenetics? We talk a lot on this show. Bruce Lipton, Dr. Lipton's been on the show, and we talk about the impact that everything we do, what we think, how it impacts our genes. So is this tied to that? Is it the same concept?
It is. We're working with biologically inherited traumas. A lot of great research is just coming out. I mean, scientists have long suspected something like this was happening, but it wasn't until about 10 years ago that Rachel Yehuda, one of the first people to study this effect in humans, a neuroscientist from Mount Sinai Medical, she did that great study, of course, with 9/11, the babies who were born to mothers who were pregnant at or near the World Trade Center, and then the mothers, when they went on to develop PTSD, had babies with PTSD. And she found also in Holocaust survivors and their children that they would have similar trauma symptoms, specifically low levels of the stress hormone cortisol. That's the hormone that gets us back to normal after there's a stressful event. Well, just last year, she published a profound study in biological psychiatry where she found that the Holocaust survivors and their children share the exact same gene changes in the exact same part of the same gene. She also says that you and I are 3 times more likely to have post-traumatic stress disorder if one of our parents had PTSD. And as a result, we're likely to suffer with depression or anxiety.
Well, Mark, how can someone tell if it's an inherited trauma or if it's just learned behavior?
I've seen some telltale signs. Specifically, we might experience a fear or a symptom that strikes unexpectedly when we reach a certain age or hit a certain milestone. For example, as soon as we get married, or as soon as we go to have kids, or we get rejected by a partner, or we move to a new place. I once worked with this woman who was consumed with anxiety as soon as she became a new mother. She never had anxiety prior to that, but as soon as she becomes a new mother, she's consumed. I asked her some of the questions that I outline in the book, and we discovered that she had a terrible fear of harming her new baby. Mm-hmm. And so I asked her, I said, did anyone in your family ever harm a baby? And at first she said, no. And then I said, are you sure? And she said, oh my God, my grandmother, when she was a young woman, she lit a candle and it caught the curtains on fire and the house caught on fire and she couldn't get her newborn out from upstairs and the baby died, but we were never allowed to talk about it, which is kind of the key. But in that moment, she made a link that she had inherited this feeling, this experience, her grandmother's experience. And then we were able to take the steps to break the pattern.
There's then a triggering event. Something occurs that makes you experience something that you had never experienced before.
Often that's the case, but not always the case. Sometimes we can be born with a feeling that we know so well we think it's ours, but it's not. It's been with us since birth, but we've never gotten to the bottom of it, a feeling that we deserve to die. I once worked with this cutter, and she cut so deeply into her arms and legs and abdomen that she'd often have to be hospitalized because of the blood loss. But I looked at, her family. I looked at her relationship with her mom and her dad and her childhood, and everything was uneventful and actually very happy. And then I asked her, what do you think about? What words, what feeling do you have right before you cut into your body with that razor? And she said, I deserve to die. And here I am, Joan, I'm looking at a 24-year-old woman whose life had just begun. And I'm thinking to myself, what have you done that you deserve to die? Did you harm someone? Did you accidentally kill someone? Did you break up with someone and he or she hung himself? What did you do? And she said, no, none of that. In that minute, I thought to go deeper. This was before I even knew that this was possible. I said, tell me about your grandparents. And this was 20 years ago, this case. And she said, well, my grandmother was an alcoholic, and she was driving the car drunk, and my grandfather was in the passenger seat. And she hit a telephone pole, and my grandfather went through the windshield, and he bled out, cut, lacerated on the glass. And in that minute, two realizations came to light. One, when she bled out, she was connected in some peculiar way to her grandfather, a story they never talked about in the family. And at the same moment, when she felt she deserved to die, punishing herself by cutting, it was never her feeling in the first place. It was the grandmother who deserved to die for taking the life of someone she loved.
So, Mark, in listening to this story, why is it so important for someone to even consider this, to bring it into their life? If they're going through a trauma, why is this even an important consideration for them in whatever it is they're going through?
Because we don't have context for what we can't explain. And many of us are walking around with fears that we never explain. We can't get to the bottom of our anxieties we struggle with. Sometimes they're sudden onset. As I said earlier, it's almost like there's an ancestral alarm clock ringing inside us. When we hit a milestone or reach a certain age, maybe a relationship falls apart at age 30, and that's the age our grandmother became a widow, and that's also the age maybe our mother and father divorced, but we don't think to question. And we biologically inherit this alarm clock, if it makes sense. It doesn't change the DNA, the sequence, but certainly the expression. So there's many genes that encode molecules for stress regulation, and that we can be affected in ways we never think to question. So it's important to look at family history, particularly at what's not talked about in our family. Many times the stories stay buried because we think we're doing our children a service by keeping our lips sealed, the doorway to the past sealed, but it's not true. I found that the less we know, particularly traumas that we have no idea have happened or we heard only once, these can have the greatest effect. It's important that we heal them. These family traumas can become inherited family traumas.
Mark, you created the core language approach. What is that? What is core language?
When a trauma happens, I believe that clues are left behind in many forms. Clearly, body images and sensations, and clearly all the things we as trauma clinicians work with. But also, we leave clues behind in the form of emotionally charged words and sentences. I find that these clues they leave a breadcrumb trail. And if we learn to follow it, it can lead us back to traumatic events, yes, in our childhood, but also often in our family history. I teach how to become a detective and how to uncover these unconscious words, the words I call core language, and then how to link them to the original trauma. And when we do this, it's like finding the missing piece of the puzzle that lets the whole picture come into view and explains why we feel the way we feel.
The book is It Didn't Start With You, How Inherited Family Trauma Shapes Who We Are and How to End the Cycle by Mark Wolynn. If you would like to get more information about Mark and his work, because we've only touched upon the subject, so there's a lot of information to learn, and you can get that at markwolynn.com. That's WOLYNN, markwolynn.com. Mark, in our final moments, in about 30 seconds or less, what's the takeaway?
To heal, we've got to have an experience powerful enough to override that habit we have of feeling bad, that old trauma response that lives inside so many of us. We need to practice the new feelings of this experience. The idea is to steal traction away from our highly efficient trauma cycle, the amygdala that keeps us in a state of suffering, and engage other areas of the brain. But first we need to shake that family tree. I find if we ignore the past, it can come back to haunt us. But if we explore it, we can break these destructive patterns.
Mark, thank you so much for being here with us today. This is truly fascinating information, and I'm just so happy that you were here to share it with us.
Thank you for having me, Joan. I was happy to be on your show.
We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Joan Herman, host of Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Did you know that Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life has a free monthly digital magazine that can be read online or emailed to your inbox? Every month, nationally recognized leaders in their field provide information to educate, inspire, and motivate you. We believe in a holistic approach to life, incorporating mind, body, and spirit. Check out a copy of Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life 24/7. Visit cyacyl.com and be sure to tell your friends. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you found the show informative. At Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life, we believe that knowledge is power. Take what you've learned, apply it, and live your best life now. Remember that the information provided are the opinions of our guests and should never replace the advice of a professional who knows your personal situation. If you'd like more information, visit our website, cyacyl.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on the site, listen to past shows on demand, read the digital magazine, and be sure to follow the show on Facebook and Twitter. Until next time, this is Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.